Welcome home, brave heroes. I'm Ash, this is HeroQuest, and it's time for another episode of Will It HeroQuest? And in this episode, we ask and answer the question, will Magic the Gathering Arena of the Planeswalkers HeroQuest? Let's get started by opening the box, and wow, there's a fully formed map grid on the inside. In this series, we will intricately and thoroughly examine all of the elements within this game system to decide, across a wide and complex variety of categories, whether or not the game is worth acquiring for monetary value in order to cannibalize it and use all of its components in your HeroQuest game. This series and this episode is for advanced homebrewers only. Yeah, we're going to go with that line and see how it does for engagement. My convoluted and very complex rule system for this series involves examining the minis, tokens, cards, the board, the dice, and the other contained within any given game's box to decide whether or not it will HeroQuest. The first thing to address is the painfully obvious hex grid system. HeroQuest is 100% absolutely a square grid system. It's a dungeon crawler, and this is kind of the standard for dungeon crawlers. I know, there are hex grid purists out there, but the hex grid is primarily a skirmish and overland exploration tool. The square grid, I believe, is supremacy when it comes to dungeon crawling and exploration. It may not be the best or most intuitive thing, or at least it's not as scalable as Hex when it comes to combat mechanics, but it does keep things simple. And honestly, if you're using a Hex grid for your dungeon crawler combat mechanics, you are bordering a little bit more on skirmish. With all those controversial statements out of the way, this is just not going to be congruent or compatible with the HeroQuest square grid. It's just not going to happen. You won't be able to take any of these tiles. Yes, rev your engine and drive by my house. Compensation for not having any cool dungeon crawlers, I'm sure. You won't be able to overlay any of these nice, wonderful 6 giant hex grid boards on your HeroQuest board. But if you want to take your HeroQuest game outside, and yes, have it border on being a skirmish game, if not going ahead and just going full skirmish with it outright, you can absolutely put your HeroQuest miniatures on these boards. You can also take individual room tiles from HeroQuest and place them within the confines of the hexes. That means you can use Magic's built-in system, the Magic the Gathering Arena, the Planeswalkers specifically, to say that if a hex is partially obscured, it is too tight of quarters to travel upon. You can't traverse hexes that are obscured in this way. This is going to make things a little bit awkward, but at least there's outline for it, there's rules for it, and you can take doors and put them on the edges of hexes here to make the system traversable from hex to square. It's totally doable. It looks a little weird, yeah, and it may depend on the size of the tile that you are using. You may have to kind of place and finagle a little bit to get it exactly where you think it should go. Here we have blocked off basically 16 tiles, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. We'll have a door here. No, we'll have a door here, actually. It's going to be a little offset for this room's purpose, which is to have a grand entry into the Return of the Witch Lord's Hall, the throne room. But you have an easy entry-exit point, and there are no questions askable, really, except for, how do I move? How's that going to work? Well, dude, genius, you count the spaces. This is a roll of, what do you want to say? Not a roll of 1, a roll of 16, fine. You go 1, 2, 3, and then you can go 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's intuitive. I think it's self-explanatory, but you can definitely put square tiles overlaid on the board. It's a little ugly, it's a little finicky, but it is doable. I would say that these do HeroQuest if you're willing to translate the rule set from the base game to a hex grid system. That's not really going to require any work from you whatsoever. The hex grid is very open. You don't have a lot of stuff blocking your line of sight, but if you want to use spells or ranged weaponry, or really, why wouldn't you? Then you can easily see how line of sight would work in this system. Barbarian has line of sight to this zombie. Barbarian does not have line of sight to the skeleton. Does the Barbarian have line of sight here? I would say yes. So if the skeleton was here, I'm not sure. I would probably have to consult a different hex grid game system to see what their line of sight rules were like. But I would say yes to here, yes to here. You could go ahead and say that there is a partial blocking of line of sight, but anyway, this is a clear line of sight. I don't care what you say. This is clear, and everything's always clear up until we get back to where right here I think is totally fine. And then like if the skeleton were to be here, that's fine. But then if we do this, then this zombie is like 50% in the way. And I don't know if I would allow or block that. You let me know what you would do. Let me know what your favorite hex grid game system does in that circumstance. I just got done saying it was easy and like it was automatically transferable, and then I run immediately into a roadblock. Doesn't matter because the barbarian utilizes melee weaponry, so all of the spaces around the barbarian clearly are going to be adjacent, and that's how we can handle adjacency. There are a couple of weapons in HeroQuest that require special attention, such as the staff and the longsword. Any weapon that can reach diagonally, the weapon would lose its value in this context because the adjacency is all around the hex grid. It's all around the hex. There is no diagonal, so you would have to maintain the value mechanically of these weapons that can reach diagonal spaces by saying that they can attack 2 spaces away. So your longsword should be able to reach this orc from this square. It sounds a little silly, but in my eyes, it's really the only way to give back the value of this weapon, which is special in the square grid world. Now the barbarian can hit any one of these targets if he has a longsword. I guess you could go ahead and say that if this sort of situation is going on, that you as Zargon make the call. Do you allow the longsword to hit, or is this monster kind of blocking the way? But then you kind of run into the, well, if you were in this square grid, you know what, this is frustrating and I'm done talking about it. We're moving on to the next point. Movement across terrain, 3D terrain. Really not much to translate here. The 3D terrain is for the hex grid system and not the square grid system. And HeroQuest doesn't have any verticality. It's got stairs, but there's really no verticality for the stairs. They don't allow you access to a higher place. There are no rules for being advantaged from being on terrain or on any space that is implied to be higher. No disadvantage being lower. So the answer to this is really, yeah, if you want to homebrew some mechanics, then yes, the terrain will absolutely HeroQuest. This is a big conditional if. Next up, the obstacles. Do they HeroQuest? These don't matter. Throw these away. These are so stupid. They were stupid coming with the Magic base game. They're stupid in HeroQuest. I guess they actually HeroQuest, ironically, more than anything else here as far as the boards and terrain and stuff go, though, because you can place these directly on your HeroQuest board, and now you have 3D terrain. It's just, they're both 1 foot tall, 2 feet tall pieces of cardboard that are going to block your actual player's line of sight to their miniatures. I guess you could use these as like a GM screen. Let's move on to the next thing. We actually skipped ahead to the board, so I guess we'll continue from here by looking at the dice. The dice in Magic, the Gathering, Arena of the Planeswalkers are like 1-to-1 copies of the HeroQuest dice. That's an exaggeration, but as far as dice faces go, there are 3 swords, there are 2 shields, and there is 1 blank face, which is useless to the heroes. So they have the exact configuration that you would expect to see on a HeroQuest combat die. Yes, these will HeroQuest. There's 12 of them too, so that might make things very interesting. Miniature scale with most of the Magic the Gathering minis is perfect for HeroQuest, actually. The only problem that I have, the only complaint really, is the base size is it's kind of silly. You can talk about miniatures encroaching off of their tile all you want. They're forgivable because their base size doesn't encroach upon any other tile, but the bases on the Magic the Gathering miniatures does encroach, and it becomes very unmanageable to put miniatures on these HeroQuest squares very quickly. This is supposed to be a 4x4 grid. Never mind the implied walls and stuff of the rotating room tile. This is a HeroQuest tile. We're supposed to be able to accommodate 16 miniatures. I can accommodate 4 comfortably. It's a far cry from 16, but as long as you cut the bases down, you can get these guys to fit much more manageably onto whatever HeroQuest tile. Having said that, cutting the dang bases, not really your job to make this HeroQuestable. I'm going to have to give them like a 50% score in that regard. Now, the heroes, the Planeswalkers, are kind of strange in terms of scale. The HeroQuest minis are 32mm and they're heroic, and the Planeswalkers minis are, they're maybe 28, not heroic. They're not heroic no matter how you slice it, but they're like this weird 28-32 blend. Some of them are a decent size, but they end up being just a little bit short, but they're just not quite either of those sizes. I guess I would call them 30mm. That's just the heroes, though. If you take a look at the zombies that come with Planeswalkers, and you do have to lift up the base a little bit to get it to match the height of the base that our HeroQuest skeleton is standing on, then the scale is a lot more comparable, although the HeroQuest minis are still heroic. The proportions are exaggerated slightly in their head, hands, and feet. It's not really enough to complain about from your side of the table, though, looking down at the board. So I have to say that all the monsters in Magic the Gathering, definitely HeroQuest, as long as you cut the bases. We're still going with that 50% rating, and I would bump this up to an 80% if it weren't for the kind of large base size. Very inconvenient. Kind of silly. The monsters, though, the monsters are cool enough looking to be in your game of HeroQuest. If a bit muddied in details on some of them definitely work on the board better than others. Like you've got these elementals, from Nissa's faction. And then you've got these elven archers. Well, you've already got elven archers in HeroQuest. Maybe you could call these a different faction of elven archers. Here you've got Nissa herself, and I just gotta continue my complaints. She's about 32. It's just the non-heroic. I think 32 non-heroic is the best way to describe these guys. All right, Chandra's minis, though, I'm going to give a bigger score to because they're supposed to take up more space than just 2. And they look like chaos beasts. They look like hellhounds. They're supposed to be some kind of feline variety, but the chaos beasts of old kind of had this look to them. So I think that they would make great modern chaos beasts if you were going to combine Age of Sigmar or Warhammer's Old World into your HeroQuest game, contemporary edition, obviously. The scale is still something that matters to me, but whether or not it's heroic doesn't quite matter as much when you're looking at creatures like the Rocks, because the Rocks is already an exaggerated proportioned beast, so the Rocks actually HeroQuest quite nicely. And then, like, weirdly enough, this hooker, his proportions look a little bit more heroic compared to his counterparts. It's a mix. It is a mix. I'm still going to give it 50%. You still have some awesome ones, though, like Chandra's Phoenixes. Now, if you plan on keeping these guys on the Hex board, it's much less an issue, but the criteria here, the entire reason we're here is to will it HeroQuest it. So, of course, I'm going to ding it. Okay, we have, for a blessing, only a few tokens, and they are meant to serve as glyphs that stay on the board and get turned over if they are turned face down, if they're being kept secret. So when you find them, surprise, it's movement +2, or surprise, it's power +1. Can translate to HeroQuest very well, but you have to keep them on the Hex board because, once again, they are not really sized to fit on the square grid of the HeroQuest board, and they are meant for board usage. I don't want to break down the tokens into subcategories, so I will say that these are usable if you just have them as boons that are findable on the board, represented by something else, maybe a treasure search in a normal game of HeroQuest on the normal board, and then you hand this to the player, or you shuffle them and have the player pick one, and then whenever they flip over, that's going to be the power-up that they receive for the rest of that quest. And this could be toughness +1, this defense +1, roll an extra defend die, power +1, obviously, roll an extra attack die, knowledge. I would say this recovers one of your spent abilities, and if you are a character, although there are fewer and fewer of them these days, that doesn't use abilities at all, then this can increase your mind points, so it's useless. And then movement +2, just add 2 movement to every roll. If it's unthreatened movement, you can now move 10 spaces instead of 8. We've done minis, tokens, and cards are next. These are army cards, and they just give the stats of the miniatures. So as long as you are able to use the miniatures in either scenario, these will be a rider to that, and they will HeroQuest. They have very few stats, a cool illustration, and some mechanical text to supplement what these miniatures can do. Now, these are worded for the Planeswalkers, so in order to use any of the creatures, you should pick out a miniature to serve as the Planeswalker, or at least serve in place of the Planeswalker if you're not trying to use this Wizards of the Coast phrasing and wording. So just to explain what I mean by that and why you would want to do that, you have your Chandra Nalaar Pyromancer, who was one of the Planeswalkers from the game, and at face value, she'll work just fine for a HeroQuest character. She has a life of 6, that's her BP. She has 3 attack and 4 defense, so that immediately translates to HeroQuest stats. She has a movement of 6, so a movement of 6. And then she has a range of 5, so she can actually target up to 5 spaces away. What can she do? She can attack, because she's plummeting heroes with fireballs. That's all there is to that. In addition to those stats, she has double attack. Whenever Chandra attacks for the first time each turn, she can attack an additional time this turn. That's crazy, but it's within the realm of HeroQuest rules already. And superheated. Discard a red card to deal 1 damage to target creature within 6 clear sight spaces of Chandra. Use this ability once per turn. We have to get into the other cards to decide how usable that is, but I can tell you now, before I even do that, that works out really well. Chandra makes for an awesome boss character, and whoever you would like to apply this card to, perhaps Cassandra, would make for an awesome boss character with just these two abilities alone. But we have two summon abilities also. These are the squad creature army cards, the Blazing Firecats and the Flamewing Phoenixes that we looked at earlier. Life 2, attack 3, defense 4, range 1, move 7, all immediately transferable to HeroQuest stats, usable on the square board. The Blazing Firecats have haste. When you summon the Blazing Firecat squad, you may immediately attack with a Blazing Firecat. Where do you put them? You'll have to define starting spaces for where Chandra or Cassandra or whoever you're going to play as the Planeswalker with the character card here can summon these creatures, and if it's adjacent to them, then they can attack if the heroes are also adjacent. It doesn't say that they can move, but they can attack. Intense Strike, whenever a Blazing Firecat attacks, if you roll at least 2 crossed weapon symbols for its attack, it gets +1 hit. I like that, and that's an element of a mechanic that has not been used before in HeroQuest, at least not officially. It's probably been homebrewed 100 times. Flamewing Phoenixes, with a life of 1, 2 cross swords, 1 shield, range of 1, and move of 6, still immediately transferable. They have flying. This is really only going to matter if there's any kind of hazardous terrain on the board. HeroQuest only has hazardous terrain like traps base game and in any expansion, but apart from traps, it has some terrain that will slow you down. In Jungles of Delthrak, well, the Phoenixes are going to fly right over all of that, and they have rebirth. Whenever you play a red sorcery, if you have at least 1 Flamewing Phoenix on the battlefield, return a Flamewing Phoenix from your figure graveyard to the battlefield on an empty space adjacent to a red Planeswalker you control at the end of your turn. So at the end of Chandra's turn, if there is at least 1 Flamewing on the field, she can spawn another Flamewing adjacent to her, just emanating all of this fiery sorcery. I really like the trample in this game that the Rocks veterans have. This would be a really fun one to transfer over to HeroQuest while attacking. If a Rocks veteran would assign enough damage to destroy a defending figure, you may have it assign the rest of its damage to a figure adjacent to the defending figure. Now that's if it destroys the defending figure. So obviously that's going to be a big deal, but if you have a lot of mercenaries out on the board, then that could ruin a mercenary and then also go on to attack another adjacent hero. Counter Strike is the best way that I've ever seen a counter attack handled, or at least it's a really, really cool way. It's one of my favorites immediately. When rolling dice for Gideon on defense against an attack from an adjacent attacking figure, each excess shield you roll counts as an unblockable hit on the attacking figure. Unblockable hit if you roll excess shields. So if the hero character rolls 3 attack dice and only ends up rolling 1 swords, you only have to roll 2 defense. But if you end up rolling 3 defense, this third one is going to turn into a swords and attack the figure immediately, and they're not able to defend. It's a counterattack. That's super intuitive and it's breezy. And it's not something that they're going to automatically just get every time they're attacked. That still relies on you to have a really weak attack. Although the way that it's written, if you roll all shields or blank faces or what have you, don't roll any attacks at all, then you're going to be doomed. Actually, Gideon is supposed to roll 5 dice. So if you roll an attack and it fails and he rolls defense against it, well, that was only 1 shield. I mean, there is only a 33% chance to roll a shield, but that's an attack. You just got attacked and you were trying to do the attacking. Anyway, I'm really excited about the mechanics on these squad and army cards. I think that a lot of them work out really well for HeroQuest mechanics as far as you're using these as like boss creatures, or that's the scenario around which the entire quest is constructed. Seek out and destroy the Planeswalker boss monster, and of course, there are no additional monsters in the quest that would make things really difficult. I think a party of 4 HeroQuest heroes against 1 Planeswalker and all of the mechanics and spells that Planeswalker has access to would be a really fun and mixed up and varied fight. And I think it wouldn't feel like a skirmish. I think it would feel like you have to figure out their strategy and you have to take them down based on what you know. That's before we even get to these cards, the spell cards. There are 2 types of spells in Magic the Gathering Arena of the Planeswalkers. There are sorceries and enchantments. You can think of these more as active and passive abilities. There are 12 cards per Planeswalker. The deck has 60 cards and there's 5 Planeswalkers. So now, I don't know how you might want to play this, but since everything else that we have read is pretty transferable to HeroQuest, these will definitely HeroQuest as long as you're playing them with the Planeswalkers and the other miniatures that they're representing. their element with. So if we give these a good shuffle and we draw 3, then that Planeswalker can have access to 3 of their abilities. Which ones will they be? Well, the heroes won't know, I suppose, until the Planeswalker plays them. But Enchanted Squad gets -1 attack and -1 defense. Now that seems like a negative thing because this is something you cast on the enemy squad. So in this case, it would be the entirety of the HeroQuest party. That's a pretty awesome bane. Killing Wave, choose a black Planeswalker you control, deal 3 damage to all non-zombie squad creatures adjacent to that Planeswalker. That's a crazy strong attack. If all your heroes are adjacent to that Planeswalker and they're trying to get in their last hits to bring down that Planeswalker and they play Killing Wave, that could potentially be a total party kill if they're all weak enough. Despise, Enchanted Planeswalker gets -1 attack. And again, that could just be a single target of the HeroQuest party. Since it's not the squad, it's a Planeswalker. It's meant to be played against the leading character of your opposing army in the game of Arena of the Planeswalkers. But translated to HeroQuest speak, I would probably use that against just one target, whatever hero you decide is worthy of that. Now, when you run out of your 3 abilities, do you continue to draw more? Well, there are a lot of Wizards and Wizards of Morcar that have 6 cards. So I would say, yeah, you could probably start out your Planeswalker with 6 of these. I don't know that I would do all 12. That seems very excessive, and they're very powerful abilities brought over into this game. So the answer is yes, this absolutely 100% will HeroQuest. It's just a matter of which cards are you allowing to come over, how many of them, and what's your rule as Zargon for allowing your Planeswalker to draw or select from the cards that they have been dealt. Liliana's Caress. Target opponent discards a card at random. This is useful for having your opponent discard either a spell or gear. You'll have to decide what that one means. Rise of the Dark Realms. Return a squad creature from your figure graveyard to the battlefield on an empty space adjacent to a black Planeswalker you control. Oh yeah, we'll have to establish the concept of the graveyard. That's easy enough. Anytime your monsters that are summoned from your Planeswalker die, they go to the graveyard. If the card talks about destroying a creature, then it's exiled. It can't be resummoned. It is beyond the grave. And that's pretty much the entirety of my harried and slightly chaotic, a little bit unhinged Will It HeroQuest for this episode. As always, the true answer lies in how you feel about this game and how its mechanics and physical elements translate to HeroQuest. But for $25, I think there's a lot of value here, particularly in the mechanics of the Planeswalkers and their creatures, because even if you don't use any of the minis, if you can just get your hand on a deck of these cards, you have rules for 5 very powerful boss monsters around which you can construct entire quests, and the monsters that they control need not be any of the monsters here. If you don't want to use these miniatures, you can use skeletons, goblins, orcs. You have 3 of any given creature you want to use across the entirety of the HeroQuest catalog. And these Arena of the Planeswalkers squads are always in 3s, so you won't need to finagle any numbers as far as that's concerned. But that's it from me for now, and I'm going to have to give Magic the Gathering Arena of the Planeswalkers a "I know I'm playing against a blue player, but will you please let me have a turn" out of 5. That's it. Farewell for now, brave heroes. Bye.